All right, everybody, welcome out. I hope you're all doing well today. We're going to get started with Second Peter 1 3. By his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. We have received all of this by coming to know him, the one who called us to himself by means of his marvelous glory and excellence. So, one of the greatest traps that we fall into is the false belief that what we need somehow lies outside of us. We feel fundamentally incapable of navigating all the vicissitudes of life which assault our everyday existence. So we turn frantically to anything that offers even a remote glimmer of hope for deliverance, assuring ourselves, of course, that we'll figure it out, that we've got this handled, that we can handle this on our own. Just not true. So Christ said that the kingdom of heaven is within us, and also that it's like a mustard seed that, although small, will grow to become the largest of all the garden plants. And this is something that we should carry in our hearts at all times. The simple knowledge that heaven isn't some place out there in the distance, but rather it's a fundamental element of our being, and it's something that we always have access to, no matter what. We carry within us that divine spark of eternal love and joy, the peace of God that can remedy all ailments and suffering. By his grace, that seed has been planted within us. And if we'll just give it the attention and the nourishment that it needs, that seed will grow to overshadow everything else in our lives. All everything else in our garden, the herbs, the food, the thorns, the weed, all that stuff. We sometimes get struck, or excuse me, we sometimes get frustrated waiting for this tree to grow. It may seem like it moves more slowly than the weeds, which jump up overnight. But remember that these useless plants also burn out much quicker. And there's a story that Schopenhauer tells about a baby oak tree that he encountered in the forest. When he went to pull it up by the roots, it cried out to him, insisting that although it might currently look like just the other weeds around it that are competing for the same resources, it was made of something much greater. And left to grow in peace, it would soon join the giants of the forest and become much greater than the weeds who now mock its slow growth. And I think that we often find ourselves in a similar situation. We get fixated on the slowness of our growth. We fail to recognize that what is sprouting within us is infinitely greater than the weeds that leap up and die just as quickly. Psalms 46:10 says to be still and know that I am God. If you're anything like me, you probably have a tendency for your brain to take off and scatter all over the place. This could go wrong. What if I do that? What about so and so? How about such and such? Why me? Oh no. Oh yay. Wait, what? No, I don't know what's going on. It's really difficult not to let your thoughts get the better of you. They take off in every direction, and just like throwing stones into a pond, even the slightest disturbance will ripple all out across the surface. At the end of the day, though, what good do any of these thoughts do for us? How much of what we obsess over is actually necessary, is actually fruitful? Matthew 6:27 says, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Excuse me. So, what do all of these frantic thoughts add to our lives? And what would happen if throughout the day we took every opportunity to remind ourselves to be still? Easier said than done, obviously. We've established a habit of letting our minds scurry every which way. And since it's a habit, it happens unconsciously without our awareness, without our knowing that it's happening. To change such a deeply ingrained habit requires a lot more than just willpower. It necessitates a change of heart. We have to be willing to make ourselves fertile soil in order for that seed of heaven to grow. And what this looks like is that we have to stop watering the weeds. The desires of the world are going to draw our energy away from the spiritual treasures that are trying to take root in our hearts if we allow them to. Chasing after the illusions of the world is a never-ending labyrinth. It's a maze of animal impulse that only leaves us drained and feeling unfulfilled. And to learn instead to be still and present will teach us to let those desires reveal themselves as these shallow phantoms and illusions that they are. To be still is the way of the spirit, but the way of the spirit is dramatically different than what we're used to. It is diametrically opposed to the way of the flesh. The body, the human impulse, it's undisciplined, it's wild, it's untamed, and it needs to be overcome. But I do take issue with the philosophies that teach a disdain and a bitterness towards the body. The physical is still God's creation. It's still beautifully designed, and I really dislike when people say that we should literally hate the flesh. God gave man dominion over, quote, every living thing that moves upon the earth. And I believe that that dominion applies just as much to the human animal, to us, as it does to the beast of the field. We're not meant to be slaves to the flesh, but rather masters of it, and benevolent masters of that. It can be really discouraging to struggle against your lesser nature and to continuously lose to those primitive impulses. But remember, it's our duty and it's our station to rule over the things of the world. And it's our responsibility to do so in a godly way. You wouldn't mistreat your cattle or your sheep, and you wouldn't water your garden with poison. You should likewise treat the body with which you have been temporarily entrusted as you would any other living thing that has been put into your care. It should be mastered, it should be disciplined, and it should be brought into accordance with your wisdom, but also taken care of and treated respectfully. You should make every effort to nurture the body with which God has gifted you with all of the love and respect that you would shower upon a child that was born into your care. And it's really shocking how much hatred and disgust people direct towards themselves on a daily basis, and then are surprised when they feel shameful, when they feel that sense of bitterness growing inside of them. And the self talk is so negative. The things that they say about themselves and to themselves are just bad. They're toxic. They're negative. They're not helpful. They're not fruitful. They're not productive. But they're surprised when they're depressed. They're surprised when they're anxious. They're surprised when they don't feel good about themselves. And part of the consequences of the fall is that we do carry a tremendous weight of guilt and shame around with us all the time. We're painfully aware of just how fundamentally messed up we are. And, even though we will jump through endless hoops to hide from this and to convince ourselves that we are good people, deep down we know the truth. We know our shortcomings better than most people. But the problem is that we fixate on those shortcomings. Christ has called us to be made new, to no longer be a slave to the past, to no longer fixate on the things that would otherwise weigh us down. And that means a few things. It means, first of all, one, to no longer live at the mercy of our old ways anymore. We got to change those habits, right? It's called to repentance. And that repentance means that we're no longer digging our own graves anymore. But on top of that, it also means to no longer let that past weigh us down. Because of the grace of forgiveness given to us, we are empowered to throw off the weight of our past and to live unburdened by our transgressions. It doesn't mean that we forget all of the lessons that we've learned from those mistakes, but it does mean that we are no longer bound by them. It means that even though we still remember where we came from, we no longer feel the need to direct that self hatred towards our past, towards ourselves, right? That self hatred that tears us apart, that divides our house. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." We are freed from the chains of the past through the forgiveness that Christ offers. But all too often, we still hold on to those chains even after they've been loosened. We bend over to pick them back up because we're comforted by their familiar weight, and we're not really sure what to do with our newfound freedom. So think of the lightness, though, that we get to experience once those chains are no longer weighing us down. Again, if you're anything like me, this probably makes sense, but doing it is a very different matter. It's hard because we're fighting against our own nature. But remember, if we're failing, it's because we're trying to do it in our own strength. It's because we're trying to force the waves into submission with our bare hands, rather than allowing the Spirit of God to quell the storms within us and around us as well. In those cases, we're forgetting to be still. We're forgetting that all the weight of our past, all our fears, all our desires of the future, and the things um, around us are ultimately under the control of our Creator. And what's more, the Creator loves us, and it loves each and every one of us individually and wants what's best for us. He will work in our lives as much as we allow Him to. All we have to do is to tend to the seeds that He has planted and leave the rest to Him. Very simple, but it's easier said than done. But it's because we want to hold on to our human way of doing things. It's because we want to hold on to our conditioned patterns, to our habits, to the things that feel right to us, to our impulses, our inclinations. 2 Peter 2:19 says, "You are a slave to whatever controls you." So if you are guided by your emotions and your impulses, then you will forever be a slave to the ways of the flesh. Our thoughts, our emotions, and decisions, they're so automatic and unconscious that we're barely ever really aware of what's going on or what we're doing, honestly. And the more you start to pay attention to this, the more you realize how much you don't know what you're doing. We think that we're making decisions when in reality, we're just reacting to the unconscious storms that are rising up within us. We don't respond to one another so much as we respond to the feelings that we have about one another. These feelings, these beliefs, these preconditioned responses, they jump up automatically without us even being aware of or of what they are or where they come from. We'll get mad at another person, believing them to have wronged us, not realizing that what we're really responding to is our own fear of vulnerability. We believe that we want certain things, not realizing that we only want them because other people want them. And we want those people to want us. The things that control us are often invisible and they're usually hidden behind layers and layers and layers of smoke and mirrors. To be still, to know that God is, it frees us from our frantic attempts to control the stuff that we can't even perceive. We don't even understand what's going on around us and we still fight for control over it. It's really silly when you stop to think about it, but we do it automatically, constantly. By we, I mean me, projecting here. So, how can we control the world if we can't even control ourselves? We expend so much energy trying to make things happen and to work out the way that we want them to, but we don't even see the strings that are controlling our actions, let alone the hands that are pulling those strings. But when we can't even see that stuff, how can we have any hope of control? We don't we don't even understand who we are. We don't understand what we want or how to settle the noise in our head. We're battered about every which way by the desires that hide themselves behind false virtue and nobility. To try to overcome the world in our own strength and our own wisdom is like trying to change the course of the wind with our hands. We can't grasp the immaterial with the material. The only solution, the only true solution is to be still, to know that God is, to experience that peace that surpasses all understanding. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Christ has set us free. James 1:25 says, but whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. So by aligning our thoughts, our actions, and our hearts with God, in His will, we stop creating the friction that results from living out of harmony with the patterns of creation. The rules that are in place, they're not arbitrary. They exist much like the laws of physics. I can ignore the laws of physics if I want to, but I don't get to escape the consequences of ignoring them. Likewise, the law of the spirit is one of cause and effect. And we have free will. We can break the law if we want to. All too often, we think that we're being challenged. We think that we're being tested, when in reality, we're just bearing the consequences of our decisions. And every decision that we have ever made has culminated in this exact moment, right here, right now. So outside forces are definitely going to interact with us as well, but all of our suffering stems from our mistakes. When we, people always disagree with me when I say that. You got to really define what suffering is, though. There's always somebody that gets mad when I say, well, this happened to me or that happened to me. What about people that go through this, that, and the other? It's like, yes, but 10 people can go through the exact same thing and interpret it 10 different ways. We can have the exact same experiences externally, but our internal perception of those events is not the same. So for one person, a challenging time may be encouraging because they may look at it and say, I'm excited because this is bringing me closer to my goals. Or I'm happy for this because it's bringing me closer to the friends and family around me in this time. It's like, yeah, this sucks, but it's like there's a silver lining here, right? Like, I'm getting closer with my community. Person may look at something that's actually good that most people are enjoying, but this sucks. I hate this. I'm so lonely. Or this doesn't align with my vision of the future. This isn't what I want to do with my life. This doesn't resonate with me. Right. So it's like you can't blame external circumstances. People have found ways to be happy, to be fulfilled, and to be to live a life of purpose in extremely uncomfortable situations, extremely bad situations, quote unquote. And then people have found ways and still do continuously on a daily basis to be depressed and anxious and unfulfilled in the best of circumstances. So it's not the outside things; it's the way that you perceive them. It's the way that you interpret them, and the things that you do have an impact. The decisions that you make matter. You're going to have to suffer the consequences of your decisions, whatever those are. Um, and so, like for example, I went a certain direction with my career when I was early on. I was like, oh, this is a good idea. This feels right. and now I'm paying the consequences for it. I'm like, actually, that was really stupid. It felt right because I was immature, but it was like, oh, it was the right decision at the time. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. Not really. And now I have to deal with that. And it's not the end of the world. You know, I learn from that and I move on and I go in a different direction. Um, and I'm very blessed that things didn't get worse than they did because they could have because I made some pretty bad choices. And so the fact that I was largely protected from consequences is a blessing I'm grateful for. But I still have to deal with the fact that I'm the age that I'm at, starting over, moving in a different direction. I have certain issues from that. I have a certain um, memories that still haunt me and certain bad habits from that time. So it's like, and also too, like there's certain areas of my life where I did well in. There's certain areas that I'm set back in, and I think that those areas are actually more important. So it's like I did not prioritize the right things, and I'm paying for it now. It's not the end of the world, but there's no point in me trying to say, "Well, this is me being tested." It's not me being tested. I was an idiot, and I had to deal with that. That's fine. Like we move on. But I think that that's important to understand that where you are right now, it's for a reason, right? And even when you make mistakes, even when you are going in the wrong direction, God can still use that to His advantage. It doesn't mean that you have to go through mistakes to grow necessarily. You could just listen the first time, but who does that? So the alternative is that it's like, okay, God's like, I still got you. Like even when you mess up, I still got you. We're still going to make something out of this. But you have to make that decision to give it back over to Him. You have to make the decision to grow, to change, to be humble enough to admit that you made a mistake, and um, to to make that first step to repent and to ask for forgiveness. But yeah, so when we try to do things in our own wisdom, we make bad choices just consistently. We're largely unaware of the things that are influencing us, and the things that are controlling us. And so therefore we often don't even know that we're being influenced. We don't even know that there's something happening to us, that there's some little fear somewhere in our brain, there's some little desire somewhere. Sometimes we do know it, but we don't want to admit it. It's like, oh, it's my intuition is telling me to do this. And it's like, no, that's actually, the lazy part of me saying I don't want to go do this other thing that's going to be hard. Or is the greedy part of me saying, like, actually I want that stuff. And it's like, it's not a noble intention, right? We don't know often how deeply enmeshed we are in the world and how we're slaves to the world, how the world controls us, how our own body controls us, right? We'd like to think of ourselves as this unified person, like it's just me. It's not just me. There's spirit, there's the brain, there's the body. And these things are all interconnected, but they're separate in and of themselves. They want different things. They have different motivations and different strategies for getting those things. And they're all kind of just crammed into one little box and having to work together. But what we're experiencing as life is a bunch of different things working together. And sometimes they don't work together very well. That's why the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Like we want on a higher level, on a transcendental level, we want certain spiritual growth and certain things of a higher nature. And then on an earthly level, on a physical level, we want to eat ourselves into oblivion. We want to drink ourselves into oblivion. We want to, pursue whatever passions and desires that we have. Um, and having those things in and of themselves are not bad. Being a slave to them absolutely is bad because that's sacrificing our higher nature for the lower. But we don't have a good angle on life from which to view things objectively. So when we try to make decisions on our own, we're doing it blindly. Even if we think that we're doing the right thing or letting our conscience guide us, quote unquote, if we're not tuned in and really listening to God, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Drink some water. Excellent water. So we're setting ourselves up for failure. Like I said, if we're not listening to God, if we're not going to Him for direction and guidance, if we're trying to listen to ourselves and what we think is best, right? Because we don't understand the unconscious forces that are battering us around, the influences that are acting on us externally and internally as well. And that's both the physical, the spiritual stuff as well. So, it could be media, it could be other people, it could be we're trying to make a decision. What do I do? X, Y, or Z? And it's like, well, at the root of all of that, we're afraid, we're terrified of being alone. We're terrified of our partner not wanting us. We're terrified of our friends thinking that we're a loser or whatever. We're terrified of financial loss. We're scared of something, right? And so that motivation is underlying all of our decisions and is pushing us in one direction. But that's for acting out of fear. That's not productive, right? That's not a good way to live our life. Or maybe, you know, in some cases, it's like it's that desire. It's like I have to choose between these couple of options, and it's like I don't even know that unconsciously I really just want other people's approval, and I'm really just desperate to have friends, to have family, to have a partner, to have something like that. And so I don't even understand that when I make that decision unconsciously in the back of my mind, I'm making it based off of getting people to like me, and I think that I'm doing the right thing because it feels like the right thing, but it feels like the right thing because that's the body, that's the flesh going, "This is what I need, this is what I want," and I'm not tuned into spirit. But I think that I'm listening to my intuition. I think that I'm listening, but I haven't learned to be still yet. I haven't learned to trust God through that. Um, so we're acting blind, or we're walking blind. Even if we think that we're doing the right thing, we're letting our conscious guide us, like I said. Um, Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and learning to be still and let Him manage our lives. That's what really starts to protect us from our own stupidity, right? We start to transcend the illusions of the world and the desires of the flesh. We allow our hearts to open up and to be transformed from the inside out. Those illusions of the material, the thorns, the stuff that chokes us out, stuff that chokes out the good seed, those are the things that we can very easily mistake for higher truth if we're not tuned into that higher truth. If we don't have a habit, a practice of walking with God, if we're not in close relationship with Him, we can be deceived, right? Because, and it's not God's fault, it's our fault because we haven't learned to tune in. When we're not in a personal relationship with God, the emotions, the instincts of the unconscious, they can feel like spiritual communication, but that's just because of our own ignorance. That's why when you look at philosophies like the New Age spirituality movement, or this New Age spiritual group, New Age movement, whatever it is, um, you see the stuff that you do, and it's funny because like you're gonna hear me hate on them a lot. Maybe hate's the wrong word, but you're gonna hear me criticize them a lot. I used to be a part of that. I used to be into that. I'll just let you know. That's I understand the appeal of the philosophy, but I've also seen kind of the inside out. And at some point, even before I came back to faith, I started to realize this is ridiculous. This is stupid. And not because it's like I just didn't vibe with it. It's because I was seeing like there's some really serious holes in your world views and in your philosophies and the way that you see life and the way that you approach life. Um, and so yeah, I think that there's definitely some value in there. Um, But it's one of those things, it's like plundering. It's when the Egyptian, or excuse me, when the um during the Exodus, when they left Egypt and they took the gold from the Egyptians, it's like metaphorically, like, yes, you can take some value from the pagan culture, from the secular world. There is something that they have to offer. However, what was that gold used for? Part of it was used to make the golden calf, part of it was used to make the tabernacle. So there is like it can be valuable, and it's not necessarily bad to say they are onto something in this one particular sense. But if you stay with that philosophy, if you allow that worldview to take over, it can very easily deceive you. So you have to. It takes a certain amount of discernment, a certain amount of wisdom. And again, where does that come from? Fear of the Lord. It comes from putting God first and listening to Him and following His direction. Right. Like I quoted Schopenhauer a minute ago. He's not a Christian source, but he does have a couple of very true things in his very profound things that he wrote about, and so I don't have a problem relaying that. But obviously, that's filtered through, um, a relationship with God and understanding like what is appropriate, what is not. New Age spiritual movement is something that's, in my opinion, become the new religion. Um, and they get so mad at me when I say that, which is why I love saying it. So we'll talk about that a little bit. They they preach a lot of weird stuff. They'll and stuff that the world will teach you too. So they'll teach you to tune. They'll say that they're tuning into their higher self, that they're listening to their intuition, that they're taking direction from the universe, all this other nonsense. Now, it sounds like good advice, right? It sounds mystical, it sounds spiritual, it sounds whatever else. But again, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if you remove God from the equation, which is what they're doing, there can't be any wisdom. It's all human wisdom at that point, which is folly. And that's not hard to see. Like people sometimes get mad when um, we try to quote and say, like, look, like, there can't be any wisdom outside of God. Oh, that's your religion trying to control, blah, 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 blah. It's like, look around you. Look at the lack of common sense in the world and understand that the world has rejected God. That's why they're stupid. And by we, I mean, or them, I mean me as well. Because as much as I stray away and fail to look to God, I'm also an idiot. But I mean, just look out in the world, the decisions that are made in society and culture, the things that are embraced, the things that are encouraged. It's like it doesn't make any sense. It's does not make any sense. Why? Because there's no wisdom there. You can focus on the material stuff. You can focus on what's the word? Not material. Maybe it is material. I don't know. I forgot the word. I'm sure it'll come to me in a second. But in this particular philosophy, they turn to themselves. They declare themselves to be the gods of their own lives, the rulers of their own lives. Which is there's like a spark of truth in that, in the sense that deep down, our souls are sparks of the eternal flame. We are made in the image of God. We're made in the image of our Creator. But there's a huge difference. I think I said this last episode or recently about there's a difference between a drop of water in the ocean, thinking that it's the ocean. It's like yes, that water does contain the ocean in a sense, and it is part of the ocean. So it's the microcosm and it's the macrocosm. And if you zoom down to a microscopic level, it's like well that there's a whole world inside of that. But that and to that micro level, the drop of water looks to be big. But if that drop of water becomes prideful and says, "Well, I can drown a ship, or I can, overcome. I am a storm, or whatever," and it splatters inside of the boat. It's like, well, that was nothing, right? In the same sense, to say that, like, yes, we are sparks from the, you know, infinite flame, but it's like that doesn't mean that we are the infinite flame. There's a difference. There's a we need to be humbled in that. It's like we should be understand that at our core of our essence is something that does resonate with the higher. Otherwise, we would not be able to communicate with the higher in that sense, right? But to say that we have control over our lives is ridiculous. And to hear these people say, "Well, no, I am the master of my reality. I'm manifesting everything. I'm creating everything." It's like you can't even control your own thoughts. Like, why are you out of shape? Why are you overweight? Why do you not sleep enough? Why are you not in perfect health? Why are you not wealthy? Why are you not perpetually happy? Because you can't do it. You can't do it on your own, not in your own strength and your own power, right? You haven't even mastered your own unconscious desires, but you think that you can, make the sun rise in the morning. It's kind of silly. So I want you to think about this because there's practical, even if you're not involved in this. They're they're saying things that are true in terms of like the exercise, right? Like the techniques of it are somewhat correct. They're right about tuning into spirit, about listening to intuition, about meditation, about setting intention. They are right about that to a degree. We don't need to get too far into the weeds with it, but for whatever reason, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, they're reluctant to admit that the God of the universe, the Creator, who was not formed by anything, who's unbegotten, that one is the one who makes the stuff work in the first place. And it's kind of silly. It's like the technique, the external stuff is right, but the belief, the connection with God is missing from that, right? And they'll insist that the universe is working in their favor. But what does that mean? It means God's creation is working. You know, you need to tune in and listen to what? To yourself, to your spirit. I love hearing this. I love hearing this because it's ridiculous. Listen to your own intuition. You have all the answers deep down. Okay. But what happens when you try to tune into your intuition and rely on yourself for answers? Well, what you really hear is your own unconscious. You hear your fears, your desires, your earthly inclinations, your wants and needs and drives and instincts of the flesh. We're not good at differentiating between intuition and emotion. They both feel the same to us. On my other show, I had somebody on recently. It was a great conversation. She was a very intelligent person, and it was a good episode. But she was talking about NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, and she was talking at the end about how, or we were having the conversation about how you kind of have. but learning to tune into your unconscious, learning to tune into your intuition, and to make better decisions with that. And I had to bring up when I was like, yes, but you have to do a tremendous amount of inner work first, because if you are not careful, you're going to make decisions that you think are your intuition. You think it's your higher self. You think it's whatever. It's think it's you're being led, and it's actually your fears. It's actually your desires. It's actually all this other stuff. And the thing is that we're so hopelessly enmeshed in that stuff. We're immersed in a world of illusion, in a world of matter, in a world of chemistry. I mean, the way our bodies work, our bodies want stuff. Our unconscious wants stuff. Different aspects of our personality want different things, right? It's like we're so tangled up in this mess. It's like there's no hope of sorting it out on our own, right? We need an intermediary. We need somebody to bridge the gap between the divine and the human, and that's Jesus. That's Christ. That's the whole point. Well, maybe it's not the whole point, but it's a big part of the point. Um, can't tell you how many times I've done this, by the way. I'm speaking from experience. So when I say you or they or whoever, I'm projecting. Just remember that. I'm not judging anybody. This is just me speaking through what I've gone through. And yes, I have witnessed other people do this. But I've done this a lot. I've looked back afterwards and realized that wasn't intuition. That was just me. That wasn't my heart. I was lonely, and that wasn't right. I was angry. I was scared. I was whatever. So it shouldn't be surprising to you when people who look to themselves for the highest good allow their lives to be led by the basest of impulses and just to justify them as good. And that's why you see a fascination with things like sexual immorality and a reluctance to stand against adversity in the secular world because they act on how they feel. And we all have the tendency to do this. It's human nature. We're not any better off than the people that I'm talking about. Like we are those people. All of us are. I am to, maybe there's certain things that I have figured out better, but there's other things that I struggle with more. Like what separates us from everyone else, from the world, it's not our own goodness, it's not our own willpower, it's grace. And when we learn to be still and to trust, when we learn to listen and to walk with God every day so that we can distinguish between his voice and our own, then we will be led by the one who is actually in control. And it's not because we're better, it's because we're getting better instruction. You guys remember the Karate Kid, right? Promises related. Fantastic movie though. But the dude knows absolutely nothing at all about martial arts at the beginning. But by the end of the movie, you know, guys with years of experience on him. Why? Because he had the right teacher. He had the mentor who knew the best way to train him, who could see past the surface level and impart deeper truths that he would need in order to be successful. And that's what we get when we listen to God, except way better, like way better. When we try to make the decisions um, on our own, we're dealing with a lifetime of experiences, of our own experiences, of our past, right? Because the brain organizes information by association. So when we encounter a situation, we're not seeing it for the first time. We're seeing, excuse me, we're seeing it in relation to every other comparable situation that we've ever been through. So without even realizing it, we compare the current to the past. So, for example, your partner doesn't text you for an hour or whatever, and your brain remembers you getting cheated on a while back, and it freaks out, or it triggers a fear from a time that you can't even remember of when your parents left you in the crib for a little bit too long and you were scared and you decided the world's a scary place. You didn't consciously say that, but that's just the association that formed. And now it's at the bottom. It's the foundation that your whole life has been laid upon. And everything that you decide and think about from forever is based on this fundamental belief that things are dangerous, things are scary, and you're going to be abandoned. And you're not aware of that, right? It's unconscious. Like that word is, we use the word unconscious so often that we kind of forget what it means. Like we don't know that it's there. We're not aware of it. Um, Same way when we dream, it's like, well, who's in our dream? It's us. Like that's our brain. The people that we talk to in our dream, the nightmares that chase us, that's us. We're just not aware of it, right? Interesting when you really think about it. Okay. So, but anyway, in this case, we're scared, we're anxious, we're thinking about all these crazy things. But in reality, the only thing that you know in this hypothetical situation that has probably definitely happened is that you haven't gotten a text for a few minutes. And that's why we're fighting, or that's what we're fighting with when we try to listen to ourselves. If we put God at the forefront of our lives, though, He will start to dissolve all those ghosts that are living in our mind. He'll shine a light on the shadows and the phantoms that crowd our heart and obscure our vision. We don't need to have all the answers. We just need to know to be still and to know that He is. He'll work everything else out. Back to Second Peter 1 3. I'm going to reread this. By his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. We have received all of this by coming to know him, the one who has called us to himself by means of his marvelous glory and excellence. We have everything we need already. To know him implies knowing in a deep, profound sense. It is an intuitive thing, but it doesn't come from a human intuition. It comes from a real relationship with the divinity that alters our heart in a fundamental way. The more we seek to know God, to deepen our relationship with Him, to encounter Him personally in a spiritual sense, in a very real spiritual sense, the more attuned we become to His voice and to His direction. He's always ready to lead us back on track, no matter how far or how often we stray. He's still prepared to use that for His will, like I said earlier. And that will involves a higher purpose and use for our life for the greater good of both yourself and for the world in general. So make it a habit to be still and to rest in the presence of the peace that surpasses all understanding, fully trusting that everything is always exactly as it should be and that you are being divinely led. All that you have to do is learn to listen and to be willing to take the next step that is shown to you. Thank you for listening, guys. Peace be with you.